All right. Hi, everyone. So we'll get started now. As always, we have just a few housekeeping rules. So everyone will be muted throughout the webinar, but there will be opportunities for participation. Please share your thoughts on the chat and or ask for in the chat, and then you can ask for questions in the Q&A box. And then the entire team is here today, so please feel free to reach out to us with any technical questions or any other questions that you have along the way. And as always, you can find these slides on GitHub right here. And that link will be shared in the chat as well. So today is our sixth official session of this beginner Python study group. I can't believe if we've already made it to the sixth week. It went by so quickly, but I've had a blast organizing this and working on this, and I hope all of you have enjoyed the sessions thus far. This week will be a Q&A session, a review week, and so before I get into the agenda, just as we always do, just some brief introductions. So I'm Rishika Singh. I'm one of the organizers for this study group, and I'm also a lead for the Python track.
Hi, I'm Karen. I'm a volunteer from on the WWCode Python track, and I'm also the organizer of this study group as well.
Hi, I'm Stephanie. I'm an evangelist with Women Who Code Python and co-organizer for this awesome study group. Thank you so much for joining.
All right. And so I'm just going to go over a few slides about Women Who Code. So our mission is inspiring women to excel in technology careers. And our vision is a world where women are represented as technical executives, founders, VCs, board members, and software engineers. Our target are engineers with 2 or more years of experience that are looking for support and resources to strengthen their influence as well as leveling up in their own careers. Our code of conduct, we take this very seriously because Women Who Code is an inclusive community. We're dedicated to providing an empowering experience for everyone who participates in or supports our community. Our events are intended to inspire women to excel in technology careers, and anyone who is there for this purpose is very welcome. You can read the full version and access our incident report form at this website right here. And here are some statistics about Women Who Code. So we have 230,000 members, 70 networks in 20 countries, more than 10,000 events, daily conference tickets priced at more than $1,000, scholarships valued at $2 million, as well as access to jobs and resources, and also infinite connections. And our movement, especially in how the world is today, so as the world is changing, we can be a connecting force that creates a sense of belonging while the world is being asked to isolate. And so we do have some upcoming events for the Women Who Code Python track. So Introduction to Autonomous Vehicles is coming up next week on November 12th. And then session 7 for this series will be happening in 2 weeks. We'll be focusing on writing your own Python module. And then we'll have another session of our ongoing Ask Me Anything or AMA series on November 27th. And then on another session for this series for the mini project session 8, and that'll be in 4 weeks. And as always, you can stay connected with us. We have social media platforms on Instagram, Twitter, and LinkedIn. And you can also find our website right here, which does list all of the upcoming events that I just mentioned, where you can directly register for all of the events. So for today's agenda, we're going to do a quick recap of all the concepts that we have covered. So basically from session 1 all the way up to session 5. Then we're going to take into consideration some pre-submitted questions. So we'll do a little bit of review of the most popular concepts that people wanted to focus on. And then we'll do a live Q&A so people will be able to sort of submit their questions live in today's session itself. And as those are coming, we'll be compiling them and then addressing them afterwards. So here's a breakdown of all the concepts we've covered. So for session 1, we had sort of an intro to the study group along with intro to Python. So why do we use it? Why is it so popular? And all of its different applications and use cases. In addition to that, we also addressed some CD and CI, which is the continuous development and continuous integration, and why that is not just commonly used for any language, but also for Python, it's very important. And we also did a brief intro to Google Colab, since this is a platform that we've been using for all of our sessions where we do the live implementation. And then for session 2, we went into Pip Install. So we also went into how to install this library on a computer. So both locally on your machine. So whether you had a Mac or a Windows, we kind of stepped through those steps. And then also how to use a Python library. So importing the library, checking a version, the structure of the library, as well as the help function. And then in session 3, went over, started to go over some data types. So we went over the numeric data types, which included int and float. And then we had the sequence data type, which included string, list, and tuple. And then session 4, we continued with data types and we went into Boolean, set, and dictionary. And then our last session was session 5, which was 2 weeks ago. And we went over elements of flow control and then specifically flow control statements, including the if, else, and elif, and how we kind of combine all of these into a single block of code. And then also the 2 different kinds of loops that we went over were for loops and while loops. So that's kind of the recap of all of our concepts that we have gone over. So now, given that, feel free to drop your questions. They can be as specific as you would like, and so we can address those. And please use the Q&A box that's provided. You should find that just sort of down below in your Zoom window. And what we're going to do now is actually start to address some pre-submitted questions from the survey that we had released. So let me hand that over to Karen.
So Karen, we have the first question is, could you please review the path info in Windows and how to get into it?
Okay, sure. So if you guys remember, like Rishika said, we did a little bit of introduction on the Python libraries. I also besides showing how to import and install and import a library on the Colab notebook, which we usually do. I also did a little demonstration on how to do it in the local environment, aka your machine, your own machine. It went a little bit trouble, so I'm gonna show it. I'm gonna show it again today on how to do it. Just like give you guys a heads up, because I don't own a Windows machine. So this I'm gonna show you guys the steps, but it might be different. It will be different than like what you are doing, but then the result should be the same. So I'm gonna share my screen now. Just give me 1 second. Okay, I think I have to share. Okay. So give me 1 second. Can you guys see my screen now?
I don't see your screen.
Okay. Let me see. Okay. Okay, I'm gonna do this. Okay, does it work now? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so
Okay, so I think we lost
Okay.
Karen. So Rishika,
Yeah.
maybe you'd like to move to the next question. So the next question is, could you share some more examples of when you would use a dictionary versus a list? And we've also just received another one in the Q&A asking to go over the difference between sets and a dictionary. So.
Okay.
hi,
Karen is
sorry.
back.
My apologies for leaving. I don't mean to leave you guys. I love you guys. Okay, let's resume. Okay, so basically, my apologies. So if you guys see my screen now, so I'm gonna show you how to download. I'm gonna show you from step 1 how to download Python first. So you go to python.org and download. You guys can follow me. Don't worry. You can watch the recording later. I'm gonna go through it really quick so we can answer other questions as well. So go to the python.org downloads, click download the Python, the latest Python 3.9. Open, like click when you finish downloading, open it. And when you make sure, and then it will see the same screen as me. So when you download it, make sure there are two boxes. So one is already like automatically clicked it up for you. Remember, and then you just remember, click the second one, add Python 3.9 to path to save you all the hustle. So afterwards, remember that. So afterward, you can do install now and you click. I'm not able to do it on my computer, but once you click the install now, it should automatically finish installing like Figure itself, and then you should have a Python. So once you have the Python on your computer, you go to like, how do you know you have the Python? One thing you can do is go to start and then type command prompt, this one. So if you type command prompt, you click and it will show you the black screen we all love. Yes. And to know whether your Python is installed, you just have to type Python. Usually it's like when it's like, I think start from version 3, you have to type the specific version. So if you type Python 3.9, so if you hit enter, in this case, you won't see it because of my computer restriction. But if you successfully download it and remember, and then you click add Python 3.9 to the path, it should show that, like, it should show you a Python, like Python is slow. How do you know Python is slow? It will show it here. So if I click here, so if you type the exact same thing, this is just picture this is the command prompt, it's the little black screen we have here. This is it works the exact same way. So if you type Python, it should show you Python 3.6.9, and then show you this is on Linux. So it should show you on the Windows. So that's how you know your Python is installed properly. And when your Python is installed properly, when you can type pip, which is the pip install that we talk about how to install the library. And it's loading. Cool. Okay. So if you type pip, it should show you a whole bunch of stuff. So you know the pip is not installed properly when you see it here. It'll be the pip is not recognized as an internal external command. So the one way, if you have this case, which hopefully you shouldn't, the way you to go to fix it is to make sure your Python is properly added to the path in case you missed a step. So what you're gonna do is to go to the start button again, and then type path. So you will see it here, added the system environment variables. So if you click it, if you click it, it will essentially it will essentially see something like this. It sees the environment and variables, and then when you go, if you can see system variables as well. So when you click path, you will see a path under system variables. So when you click, you see the path and you click edit. This is a picture, that's why I can't show you guys the actual stuff. You can edit and you will see what you see right here. Like this list of the environment variable. So all you have to do is to add Python on the system. I can show you guys, I can give you guys a step more in detail, or I can find the solution more in detail if you guys still can figure it out. If you guys still have trouble, feel free to reach us as well if you guys have any questions. But then that's how you basically do the path with Python and with installing the library, aka the pip manager package. Yep. I'm good, Stephanie.
So Rishika, on to you with those two sets of questions.
Yeah, so I believe there's something sort of distinguishing when to use sets versus dictionaries and also versus lists. So that is a really good question, kind of when do you use each of them? So just to keep in mind, it does kind of depend on what exactly you're doing with it, because each of them kind of have different speeds with how they handle different operations. So lists are typically a little bit faster than sets when you want to just iterate over the values. And then sets, however, are actually significantly faster than lists if you want to just check if an item is actually contained within it. And an important distinction is that sets can only contain these unique items. So that's why they're typically faster, because in lists you can actually have duplicate elements. So if for some reason you want to allow the data you're working with, or whatever it might be, if you want to allow duplicate values, then you will want to use a list. However, a set kind of has that constraint where you can't have the same value repeated twice. Also, it turns out like tuples, I know that's not really part of the question, but just in general, tuples are actually kind of similar to lists because they can also have duplicate elements. They don't need to have, every single value does not have to be unique. So they do kind of perform in a similar way as lists for both trying to iterate over all the values. So basically trying to go through every single value that's contained in that set of elements or sequence of elements. And also if you have an operation of trying to actually check if an item is actually contained in there, tuples have a similar time performance as lists. And another important distinction about tuples versus sets and lists is that tuples are immutable, meaning that you cannot change the values once they've already been declared. And sort of set in that variable that you've declared. So that's another very important distinction. And then as for dictionaries, I would say dictionaries are quite a bit different from tuples, sets, and lists. As you can see, there is some overlap between those three. Dictionaries are important when you can have these key value pairs. So if you remember, you kind of have this association between a key and a value. So say you have a key of 1, 2, 3, and then the value that's associated with each of those. So say you have 1 associated with the letter A, 2 associated with the letter B, and etc. And so if you have say you're have a data set where you want to sort of maintain associations between 2 different columns of values, or perhaps this data is has inherent associations that you want to make sure are still captured and still contained when you're doing anything with that data. So if those associations exist, then that's when you want to use a dictionary. So I hope that kind of helps to give a clarification between the differences between sets and lists and tuples, as well as dictionaries. In general, sets and lists and tuples are a lot more similar to each other, with some more minor differences, and dictionaries have quite a bit of a different use case as compared to these other 3.
Okay, so we have one more pre-submitted question that we'd like to get to, and this one is for Karen. How do you use dictionaries for mapping values, i.e. product codes and categories?
So dictionary, the difference between dictionary and list we said because the dictionary, the list is like it's not arrayed, so basically it's not in order. So basically you put whatever it's like B C D E A, it will show as a B C D E A. Dictionary is when you have dictionary is like you have a key and a value pair. So this is something very unique of a dictionary and very useful. So for example, you want to find, for example, you have like you want to find where the specific location or specific value. With the list, you have to remember its location you have to count like from like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then like type find, and then like you show your value. Where a dictionary, you can just pull something from the key, which is like a similar than with like an actual dictionary we use on like the actual book, and you find the grocery, you run the groceries, and then like you just pick the word and then tell you what page it is. It's also like a table of content. So that is the, so when it comes to, yeah, so when it comes to looping the value, so you have to use when we loop a list, when you do loop a list, like you just have to loop the value. So remember when, because dictionary has keys, so when you're doing anything with like dictionary, you have to loop the key and the value together.
Great, thank you, Karen. So now we can move to Q&A. We have a few questions that have come in. Where do we go from here to continue Python learning? Who would like to take that question?
I can start off, and if Karen, if you want to add on anything. So for me personally, Python was the first language I sort of started to learn, and when I was trying to see what more I could do with it beyond my classes or beyond just sort of when I was learning Python on my own, was kind of where do my personal interests lie? And I think that's where personal projects really come into play, because I think, at least for me, when it comes to coding, I want to, care about the code. I want to be interested in it. I want to have sort of a personal investment in it, because that kind of drives my motivation to keep working on it. So if you find a certain application or a domain really interesting, I would definitely go for that. Python is really popularly used for machine learning and artificial intelligence and data science. There's also NLP, which is natural language processing, which Python also uses. Python in general is also used for just if you're trying to work with large sets of data. So I would just suggest that you try to find sort of an application or domain that you find personally interesting to you, and start out with just a personal project. There's a lot of blog posts out there and articles that kind of you can follow along the steps and try to build something. And you can start out by sort of mimicking what someone has already laid out, and then maybe on your own you can see, how can I extend it, how can I make this a little bit more interesting or a little bit more complicated. And I think that's kind of would be a good like next step after sort of getting some fundamentals of Python.
Okay, Rishika, this next question is for you. Could you share the main differences between JavaScript and Python?
Yeah, so in general, JavaScript is more of a scripting language. Python is more used in object-oriented programming. So this is where you're able to build large apps and websites, and this is all using objects. And we haven't exactly gone into this in the study group since the object-oriented programming concept is a little bit more advanced for a beginner study group. But you can kind of see this as kind of like these these objects are sort of the building blocks of any large application, and these applications can be websites, they can be mobile apps, anything like that. So that's kind of a really important distinction. Each of them are used have different use cases. As I mentioned, Python is really good at dealing with large data sets, whether that be sort of data cleaning and pre-processing. It's very popularly used for machine learning. And I think in general, it's kind of the first stepping stone for any beginner programmers to sort of start out with Python and then go from there. I myself am definitely a lot more well-versed in Python as compared to JavaScript. And yeah, I think I saw like a poll the other day of like sort of the top 10 or top 5 languages that people want for companies, and Python started out probably in the top 10 a few years ago, but it's definitely getting up there, and I would say it's probably in the top 3 alongside languages like Java and C++.
Thank you, Rishika. So we're caught up with Q&A at the moment. Somebody is asking if you could share the main differences, similarities and differences between Python and JSON. Rishika, is that
Sure.
one you're able to take?
Yeah, I
Or
can
would you
take
like to
that.
come?
Yeah, so I know JSON is I forget what exactly it stands for, and I want to say it's like JavaScript. Is it a JavaScript object notation? I think it's JavaScript, and then I'm not sure what the O stands for. But it's basically a way that data is sort of it's a way that data is structured, and it's actually a like a file format. And that's typically what you'll see a lot of times that data sets are available in. And the reason why JSON is used is because you're able to get this sort of structured and this hierarchical sort of overview of how the data is. So you can sort of get nested values, and I don't want to get too much into depth about it, but just at a high level, you can use Python to work with data that is stored in a JSON file. That's typically what you do, and you can very easily, as we've been using Google Colab, there's actually a sort of a read JSON method. So typically you can work with like a CSV file, which is what you find in any sort of Excel spreadsheet. Or any basic text file. A JSON file is just another file format where you can directly read that in using pandas, which is a library that you guys have seen in the past. And that's where you can directly sort of ingest this data into whatever framework you're working with. We use Google Colab, you can use it anywhere. And you're able to sort of maintain that structure that's in that original data.
Great, thank you, Rishika. So would we like to move to some real-time coding exercises? And if so, Karen, would you like to start us off?
Sure. So so this is like one of the pre-submitted questions. We wanna when people of you asked to go through how to do how to do like dictionary, like if we introduce a dictionary again and then a tuple. So I'm gonna go through the tuple. Give me 1 second. I'm gonna share with you guys. Okay, so you guys can see my stuff. So just want to like quickly reintroduce what it is the tuple. So I kind of break it like step like what is it, how is it, why is it, and when is it. So tuple is a collection of data which is ordered and unchangeable. It means like it will display output like order like out in everything in alphabetical order with like but then like no editing is allowed. So tuple is represented in with a square bracket, 1, 2, 3, like an example shown right here. And tuple is very often used on a library function when it returns, when the value as a return value, because it's not because sometimes when you write the module, which we will go through on the next section, where like you don't want the value to be changed and you don't need the value to be changed. So when you pass the value between different functions and different modules, a tuple is very popular to use. So that's why you guys probably don't see it as much. And it's because it's like a hidden, very common hidden like data type that is often used at the back. So like I said, like when do you use tuple by yourself? Like you want to use it. First of all, you don't want anyone to you don't want anyone to like change the collection of the data, and then you don't want an array value. Like you want the value no matter what type of no matter what order the value you put in, you want it in alphabetical order. So we'll go a very quick example of how to use tuples. So right now I have two tuples, A, B, and C, and like I have one tuple called A, I have the tuple called B. So how do you do it is, so we're gonna so you have to join the tuple since you can't edit it anyway. So to join the tuple is to call it C and then A plus B. So simple as that. And then you run it, and it takes some time, and then it will see it's just joined together, the two tuples. And then what you want to delete, if you want to delete you want to delete the tuple. Let's say you want to delete C. You want to delete just the one that we just joined. And so you just have to click delete. And C is gone. So that's for tuples, like very quick introduction and recap at the same time. So let's go to dictionary. So dictionary, what is a dictionary? So dictionary is a collection of data that are ordered, changeable, and indexed. So like I mentioned before, the signature of the dictionary is the key and values pair. So dictionary is presented in the curly brackets. Sorry, I might got the term wrong. But so where it presents, so key and value is separated with a colon, and then like two the sets of value are separated by the comma, by a comma. And so it's used because why it's being used, because you can name the index depending on your own choices. You don't have to restrict 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You can name anything you want. And it's also very easy to read and change the data because you can get the value, like I said, as the dictionary, you can get it anywhere. You don't have to remember the location, especially you have a large set of value. You can just pull the key and grab your value. So when you want to keep a large set of value in a very ordered manner, dictionary is your choice to use it. It's convenient. Okay, so we will do some very quick example how to use a dictionary. So for example, I have a set of dictionary here, which is like the category of pets. So we have dog, we have corgi, a Labrador, a golden retriever, a mix. We have cats, Persian blue, Persian, a calico, and mix. And then we have other type of pets. So think of it as a pet shop. Oh, we have a horse, a squirrel, and everything. And so if you want to update the value, oh, what is a D here? Okay, so if you want to update a value, I'll just show you something very quick. So if you want to update a value, so basically I want to put, let's say, a pig. Like some people like to have a pig as a pet. So for obviously pig is not cat or dog, so it's plenty or others. So how do you update it is like you put pet.update, and then you put, oh, sorry, my bad. So this is a function. So you put a bracket here first, and then you do others, and then you put here. So you have to, unfortunately, you have to type it all over again to make sure you get every value. So squirrel, and then other, and then lizard, and then pig. Pig. Can't even spell pig right. Okay, all right. So if you type it, if you see here, you will see a pig here. You will see a pig here. But if you don't update it, if you without the update, you will see just it goes up to lizard and then without the pig. So this is how you add the value. So how do you delete a value? So if you want to delete it, it will be tab pop. We use the function pop as delete. So basically pop something out. So when you delete something, you have to delete the entire value. So you have to put others and then put none. Here it shows you. So if you pop and type pets again, and it's gone. So this is how you do, this is how you add value and pop and value on both from both like tuples and dictionaries, and hope it helps. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Karen. So now I'll go over a couple more live coding exercises. Let me just pull this up. Can everyone see that okay? All right, so the first concept is sort of just an if-else statement, and sort of how do we deal with if statements and else statements. And this was kind of a funny meme. And so basically showing that AI is made up of a bunch of made from a bunch of ifs and elses. So that's kind of how AI works, where you kind of just have this sort of this flow of programming logic, and you try to just figure out, you know, if this work is it this one? If it's not, then it's this one, and then you eventually get to the end. Anyway, so this is our example for today. So say that we have this variable called num, and we've already set it equal to the value of 1,000. And so here I have a one if statement, and then two elif statements, and then the else at the end. So if you recall, an if statement is basically sort of checking for this true or false. You can basically have a true value or a false value. So if it's true, if this specific line of code is true, then it will basically do whatever is included in sort of that indented piece of code. If it's not true, then it will jump to this next elif statement, which is essentially an else if statement. And you can actually have several elif statements combined into this. So I can have 2, I can have 3, I can have 100, as many as you want. And then we always ended with this else statement at the end, and that's basically that basically means that if we don't satisfy this first if statement and then these two else statements afterwards, then we reach this else statement at the end. So basically everything else is false, and then we arrive at the else statement at the end. So what I've done here is basically we're checking for different ranges of numbers, given that our number that we've declared to be 1,000. So this first if statement, we want to check for if it's in the range of 9 to 99. So a way that we can do that is we can basically kind of have some pre-filled in code here. So we're basically just going to fill up everything for these individual statements. So if you want to check if the number is between 9 and 99, as you recall, these two symbols right here is basically less than. So if it's in the range of 9 to 99, that means that it's you know, greater than 9 or less than 99. So that means that we can essentially put 9 right here. And then since we're checking the range of this num variable, then we put that in the middle, and then we're saying num less than 99. So if we were to break this down, we've kind of combined sort of two different statements into one. So this is saying 9 less than num less than 99. This kind of breaks down to two statements, where the first one is basically num is greater than 9, which is the same as 9 less than num. You're basically just flipping the values, or num is less than 99. And then if that is true, then say we can print out 2-digit number. So as you'll see, the pattern that I'm trying to do here is basically we first check for the range of 9 to 99. So every number between that range is a 2-digit number. Then when we jump into 99 to 999, that actually becomes a 3-digit number. So now what we can do is, now that we have an elif statement, basically if since our number is 1,000, we know that it's not in this range. So why don't we check the next range? So here we have 99, and then we have 999. And from there, so if the number is between 99 and 999, then we can say 3-digit number. And then our next elif statement, now we're checking for 999 to 9,999. So as you know, our number is 1,000. So it does not satisfy this if statement. And then we also does not satisfy this statement because it's indeed greater than 999. So that's why we have this one last elif statement. And what we can do is basically put 999 on the left-hand side, and then a number with 4 9s on the right-hand side. And if that is true, then we say 4-digit number. And then else means that we're basically checking all other numbers. So here we kind of started out as this lower bound to be 9. So if our number was 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, anything, even a negative number, it would sort of satisfy this else statement at the end. Or if it's anything greater than 1,000, then it would also be printed out here. So we can basically say number is less than or equal to 9. That's kind of the notation for less than or equal to. And then, or it's greater than or equal to. It's kind of the same way, but you kind of just flip it over to greater than or equal to, and then say 9999. So if we run this piece of code, what we would expect is, just give me a second. What we would expect is to get a printout of 4-digit number. And that makes sense because our number is 1,000 and it's therefore it satisfies this statement right here. Say we were to change it to 10,000. Now we would expect it to print out the last, this else statement down here. And it's kind of something that you can do on your own, basically change the value of num and see what actually gets printed out. The next one is now a little bit different. And now we have actually included sort of two separate sets of conditions. So first, we're going to define our variables. So we have a variable called room, which is equal to the value of a bed. So basically just a string. And you know it's a string because it's inside these two quotes. And then we basically have another variable called area, and this has a numerical value of 14.0. So our first set of conditions is basically our conditions for room. So we're looking at this one first. So we want to check if the room is in the kitchen or is the kitchen. So first thing we can do is if room is equal to kitchen. And if you remember, this double equal sign is basically how you check for this Boolean value of either true or false. When we use this as a single equal sign, you're basically assigning a variable a particular value. So that's a really important distinction. So if the room is the kitchen, then we can say looking around in the kitchen. And then say if you want to check if it's in the bedroom. So the same way that we did here, we can basically say elif room is equal to bedroom. And then we can basically say, you know, looking around in the bedroom. And so this is, yeah.
Sorry, could you might zoom in a little bigger? I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I'll just do it from here. Is that better?
Yeah, it looks good.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, so this is kind of just some, you know, if and elif statements that I kind of just came up with. You can definitely add more on your own, but I just kind of wanted to demonstrate how you can sort of check for different conditions. So if elif room is equal to bedroom, then we print out this. And then let's say that it doesn't satisfy either of these, then we're saying, or we're checking somewhere else in the house. So we can say looking around somewhere else. And so what you can do is you can sort of change your room. Actually, let me change this here since you want this to match right here. So what you can do is basically change this room value. So you can change it to kitchen, and then I would print out this first if statement. If you leave it as is to equal to bed, it would print out this statement right here. And then if it's neither bed nor kitchen, then it would print out what is being printed out here for this last else statement. Then I have another set of conditions for area. So as you know, our area is 14.0. So what I've done here is basically checking if area is greater than 15. So that basically means this greater than sign, and then 15. So if it is indeed greater than 15, then we can say, oh wow, big room. And then if you want to check for any other value, so basically here where we were checking for greater than 15. So if it's not greater than 15, that means that it's either equal to 15 or it's less than 15. So we don't have to specify that. We can just say else, because if it's not greater than 15, then it's basically everything else. And then what we can print out here is maybe, let's say, oh wow, small room. So if we run this cell right here, added a second parentheses there. So as you can see, since our room variable was set to bed, we got this this second elif statement to be printed out. But if we were to change it to kitchen, then we would get this first one to be printed out. And then now, since we know our area is equal to 14, it does not satisfy this first statement, and so it satisfies the else statement. So that's why we get out this statement printed out, meaning that our area is indeed less than 15. If you were to change this to 20, then we can see that now it says, oh wow, big room. And feel free to sort of change these values, play around with it, and see kind of what gets printed out when you change the value of those variables. And then the last thing to go over here is for loops. So if you recall from our session on for loops, it kind of had this little image here. I kind of just included it here so all of you can take another look at it. But here are the examples that I have. So I'm going to demonstrate a for in the list and then in a string. So say I already have a list declared, and the name of the list is fruits. And the way we declare is with these square brackets on either side. And then we basically have three values in here. We have apple, banana, and orange. And they're all three different strings because they're enclosed in a pair of quotation marks. So we have three values inside this list called fruits. So say we want to print out every element of this list. So what we can do is, if you remember, for loops are really important for iterating over any sort of sequence, whether it be a set or a list or a tuple or a dictionary. It can be applied to several different things. What we have here is a list. So when I mean iterating, it means going through every single element or every single value that's in that specific data type. So here we have a list and we want to print out everything that is in this list. So what we hope for is a printed out statement of apple, banana, orange. So the way we do that is, if you recall, there's sort of two different ways for loops. I'm going to be using one of the ways right now, and then we'll use the range function, which is the second way. So what you want to do is do for, and then any sort of character that you want. So you can do for X, or we can do for I. Typically, we use either one of those. And then we do the in keyword. So that basically means that in a specific, set or list or whatever it might be. And then we want to say fruits. So this means that for X in fruits means that for every element in fruits, what do we want to do? We want to basically return the value. And the way we return it is by printing that. And then we have to say print X, because X is basically what we're referring to in here, which is every single element in fruits. So if we run this right here, you'll see that we get apple, banana, orange. And so, that was a pretty simple way. And what we can do is, if say we want to add in another fruit, let's say I add in tangerine. So I just added in that value of tangerine and ran the for loop, and it is able to print it out. So you're able to sort of add and subtract different values to it. That makes it mutable, meaning that you can very easily change the elements that are actually contained in that variable that you've already declared. Next, I'm going to do a for loop in a string. So taking one of these, let's take apple. Say I want to print out every single character that's in that word apple. And that word apple is actually declared as a string, as I mentioned, because it's enclosed in these quotations. So what we can do is, again, we can do for X, and then we have to make sure to do the in keyword. And then let's say we do apple. So now we're basically telling it, okay, so I want you to go through every single one of the, everything composing this string. So it's going to go through A, then P, then L, and then E. What we want to do is print X, just like how we had up here, because all we want to do is basically return that value. So if you print this out, now you'll see that every individual letter that's in that string is now printed out. We can very easily change this to banana, and then all the letters get printed out. So then a couple more examples. So as I mentioned, we've been using this way of a for loop where you kind of have for and then any sort of X or I, and then you have the in keyword, and then you have the actual iterable that you want to sort of work with. And this iterable can be a string, it can be a list, it can be a tuple, any of those things. Here, what we're doing is actually using the range function, and this range function actually takes in numerical values. So we still have this X in, but instead of an iterable that you have, you actually put range of something. And let's say we want to just put 5. So X in range 5 means that we're basically, let me just print this out so I can sort of explain that. So when we're doing for X in range 5, as you remember, we start out everything from the value of 0. So 0 is kind of like your first element. So we're not actually iterating over a list here or a string or anything. All we're doing is it's looking through all the different, the actual digits from 0 to infinity. And what we're specifying is for it to print out every single one of those. And since 0 is our first element, it starts out as 0. And when we specify range 5, that basically you're telling it when to stop printing it out. And as you can see here, we have 5 values, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. If you were to change this to 10, then now it's actually going to print out 0 through 9. So just an important thing to keep in mind is that even though our range here says 10, your last value is actually 9. So a nice and easy trick is basically if you have any value in here in closing the parentheses, you basically do -1, and that's going to be the last value that gets printed out here. And then the last exercise I have here is we're going to add an else condition in this for loop. So let's say that we are using the same for loop. So let's say we have 4x in range and we're going to do 10 again. And we're still going to be printing out x. But what I've added here is an else condition. So if what this else condition means is that once it's done printing out all of these values, and as you saw, what you printed out was 0 through 9, once it's done doing that, then it's going to print out whatever is in here. And the reason why it does that is because it's basically sort of satisfied this for loop. And then once it's done with that, it basically jumps to this next else statement and then basically runs whatever code is in there. So let's say all done printing out the values. I mean, that's kind of just something you can write. You can add in there just all done, or you can print out anything you would like. But basically, what we expect to see is that after it's already printed out 0 through 9, then it prints out all done printing out the values. So this is really important because you can sort of see, where's your for loop actually, at what point is it done running, how long does it run for. So it's kind of an example of where an else condition is really useful for loop. This was kind of a more simple demonstration of that, but that's just showing you what exactly or how exactly you can combine these different concepts together. And so that's all we have for the coding exercises.
Had a question pop into the Q&A. Between JavaScript and Python, which would you recommend for learning data structures and algorithms?
Oh, Karen, go ahead.
Oh, no. In my personal opinion, if you want to, well, since this is the beginner Python study group, Jay, we recommend Python. That was one of the reasons is because Python is very high. It's like Rishika mentioned, it's the object-oriented programming language. So in a way that it's fairly easy to understand. It's very easy to pull out something and use something. Where JavaScript is definitely a more detailed language, like a scripting language, like Rishika said. There are things, for example, there are things like Python already like built-in library that like their function is like predefined. Like for example, one of the language like I don't remember what's the C, I think you have to like predefine like, oh, this variable is what data type. One of you was actually asking on one of the section, where Python you don't have to, and JavaScript is I would say if you wanna do a more like a front end development, go ahead with JavaScript. It's definitely more useful because when you touch Python, when you want to do something front end, even with Python, you will eventually go back to JavaScript, like Django, for example. But if you want to do, like a full stack, like want to understand the back, like how it works, and we would definitely recommend Python.
All right. Do we have any more?
Yeah. Marianne, we can go through, like, I saw your question here. You can show, we can talk to break and continues again, like briefly if you want.
Rishika, would you like to show a little more illustration on break and continuous in terms of your conditional statements?
Yeah, definitely. So as you recall, for break and continue statements, these are used when you have any sort of any normal loop that you have. So you can use them for both while loops and for loops. And they're basically used to modify the behavior of any loop that you have. So as I mentioned, loops basically help you to iterate over a certain block of code that you have, and it basically keeps going until it meets a condition that actually evaluates to false. And so say you want to terminate this iteration process, or maybe you want to basically sort of skip over something or force it to basically continue iterating. This is when you actually use break and continue statements. So a break statement will completely terminate the loop at whatever place that break statement is at specifically. So this is really useful for when you get stuck in this infinite loop condition. Say you unknowingly added some piece of code where it just keeps going and going and going. What you can do is, I believe there's like a control, I don't know if it's control C, if that's a command. I know that's a way to like immediately stop your code. Definitely use that a lot myself. But break statements basically allow you to sort of go into that body of code. And once it sees that, it'll immediately exit that loop and stop running and stop iterating over it. And then a continue statement, on the other hand, is actually used to, say there's a if there's a piece of code that you want to be skipped over, then it'll skip it over for only that current iteration that you're in. So say this is like your second time looping through it, and you wanted to basically skip over one of the elif statements or one of the if statements, it'll basically skip over that specific piece of code and then just continue on for the rest of that second iteration that you already have going on. So in this case, it doesn't actually completely terminate your entire loop. It basically will just help you to continue on for the next iteration that you would like. So those are kind of the two different use cases for break and continue statements. They're both used for different things, and they're specifically used for any kind of loop that you have, whether that be a while loop or a for loop.
Okay, next question. Can we touch on list dictionary comprehensions, please? Karen, would you like to take this one?
Yeah, I can show a little demonstration if that's helpful. That's might be more helpful. So we go back to the Colab notebook here. And so I'm gonna just do very quick review, like quick thing about lists. So for example, if you want to do, when you compare in the list, you just have to put like for example, list A equals to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, something like this. So this is like how you comprehend a list. This is how you did make a list. So if you type list A, then you will see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And the dictionary, you can, for dictionary, to write a dictionary, you can actually put a list inside. Apologies, I didn't mention it on when I showed the demo. So you want to do like a dictionary. It's the same thing essentially. So dictionary, like I mentioned, you have to use the curly bracket, and then you have to write a key and a value. So for example, if I want to put, let's say A here, so I have to put a key. So key could be like 2, would be like 1. This is the key. Separate with a colon, and then put something like, you can put something like 3.4. I'm gonna go all numeric here. So this is one key, one value, key value pair here. Separate with the comma, and we do a second one. So second one is called 2. Let me separate them. So with a colon, And then this time we can do a bracket of like a list. So we can do 5, 2, 4, 5, 6. So key has to be a single value where the values itself, it can be either like a single value like this, or it could be a list, or it could be a tuple as well. So going with a 3, then you like, so we write the third key value pair. So we do, so instead of typing this time, I'm actually gonna put list A here. So you can actually do that. So if you type a, you will see you will see exactly what it sees here, what I type here. So key is 1, 2, and 3. And then you have the other values like that I listed here. So I hope it helps. I hope it helps on how to actually write a list and a dictionary. Do you have any more questions?
Do you have additional topic?
Maybe you guys can share with us if you guys don't have any questions. Maybe you guys can share us what you're working on. Is there anything that a project like, like discuss with someone? I saw a very delightful message yesterday on the general channel on the Slack, and like she'll talk about pairing coding, co-mentoring. So maybe if you guys want to share with us, like you can find a partner, because the reason we're learning Python is like, one is for the job, maybe for the future, and also we want to do something that we want to accomplish something. So sometime when we accomplish something, we need a little help, and a little help would be better. So yes, like feel free to share with us how you guys doing, how you guys liking us. Don't hate me, please. And yeah. Okay, Pretty asked a question. Let us know and any other good resource to add on to our Python learning. So Python, if you like an absolutely beginner, I would definitely recommend W3 School. I'm gonna type it. Oh, I'm gonna type it here. W3 School. W3 School. I type it on just on the chat. So this is a good way to start. If you gonna want to pay for the course, you want to learn Python for free. That's like a good way to start. It will help you go through all the very fundamental part of the programming itself, not just Python. So if you're a beginner, absolute beginner, start there. Recommend. That's what I would recommend. Also, the book we all like, and we all use reference for, is the automating the boring stuff. It also show like a lot of like very good, very detailed example. How do you use different functions? How to use a list, a dictionary in Python. If you're coming from another background, like for example JavaScript, C Sharp, like a front end, you want to learn Python you probably, when you learn Python, you probably get something somewhat familiar with like certain ball method and pattern. So it depends on where you want to get to Python. If you just want to get familiar with Python, I would suggest you to go to some open source projects like if you wanted, for example, you want to do machine learning, so start from a website called Kaggle. So Kaggle, Kaggle, like start practicing projects. Start doing like, you basically project is for me is like you code for purpose. So you want to find out something. It's like business analytics. So you want to find out something, and you type this script, and then you find the solution. So that way it will, and then of course between that you'll find any so much like debugging, like any debug, any struggle, like all the struggle, everyone happens to that, and from there that's how you learn what you that's how you learn how to like a chat. That's how the way you learn more about a programming language itself. So yeah, that's what I would recommend. Rishika, do you have any recommendations?
Yeah, I definitely second everything you mentioned. Those are amazing resources. W3 Schools really breaks down a lot of concepts, and you can use it not just for Python, other languages too, or just other broad concepts in computer science and programming. There's also, I think it's Geeks for Geeks. That's also a really helpful one because they typically have sort of a conceptual explanation of whatever it might be, if it's a Python data type, if it's something in JavaScript, whatever it might be, and then it actually has some sample code for you to run through. And I feel like they definitely explain things really well. I dropped some links to automate the boring stuff with Python that Karen mentioned, along with Kaggle. And then this is Code Academy, also a really probably one of the best resources for anyone who's a beginner. This one will take you directly to everything with Python, but again, Code Academy has things for all different languages. And yeah, I think there's definitely lots of great resources out there on the internet. And I would definitely second that having some sort of open source projects or just personal projects to work on, that's where you get to work on something that you have personal interest in. I mentioned that a bit earlier too.
And one thing, guys,
oh, sorry, I was going to change to another question. Go ahead, Karen.
Oh, one thing, if you guys stuck, remember the Google helps everything. Like, don't worry, you guys not alone. Like, just Google everything. But sometimes you don't get the answer only because like it's not the right question. It's not the term. Sometimes the terms could be tricky. When you don't know the terms and then you want to ask the question. So that's sometimes you better just keep trying. Like we type the same question in another way, another form. That's how it works for me, and you eventually find the answer. I'm good.
Yeah.
Sorry. Okay, so Rishika, we have a question in Q&A. We're using more than one for loop or if statement. How do you know where to place the return or answer so that it outputs?
Okay, yeah. I can go back to sort of the live, that coding exercise that we already had up to show you. So with this example here, so in a for loop, the way that you know that your print statement or your return statement, whatever it might be, is in the right place is that you actually have to sort of indent by one level. So typically when you're typing anything, like let's say we have for I in range 5 and then we press enter, it will automatically indent for you. That's kind of a nice feature. A lot of sort of development environments do that for you, so you don't necessarily have to worry about doing that yourself. But this sort of one indentation in basically lets the computer know that you're actually, whatever is contained inside here is where you want something to be printed out. And then once you're done with that, you basically can press enter and then press the backspace button, and now you're sort of returned back to the same level of that for loop. So now whatever you print out here is basically not going to be nested inside that for loop. And the same thing goes for an if statement or an else statement, as you can see here. So if you were to say if, or say like, let's say have else, it automatically indents for you again here. And so that's how you sort of make sure that whatever print or return statement that you have, to make sure that it's actually being printed out in the correct way that you want.
So last call, if anyone has any questions, please pop it in the Q&A. We do have just a few more minutes.
You guys all good to go to learn a Python module? Like we kind of wanna emphasize a little bit on this review, because when we go to the section 7, I think 7, like when we write a Python module, you really need to know everything together, because like so like everything fundamental you will be seeing on the section 7. So if we can answer you guys, if the question that you ask, and then like we can you guys still have some doubt with questions, like feel free to reach us. You don't have to talk to us here. You can reach us on Slack, like we always mention. So like just to get you guys familiar with everything.
We do have a question that just popped in. Do you have a preferred Python environment such as Anaconda?
I have, I can't say I've used Anaconda very recently. I think I've used it more when I was starting out, just to see kind of what different development environments and platforms there are out there. Personally, I use Google Colab even for my classes and for a lot of other application, or a lot of different other projects, because one is very user friendly. Two, you don't really have to worry about a lot of setup that you have to do if you were running any sort of Python program locally on your computer. So I'm a huge user of Google Colab. And you can also kind of the non-cloud version, I guess, of Google Colab is just like a Jupyter notebook. So you kind of can do the same things, and it's the same kind of code. You can still do it in Python. And my own research focuses in sort of in the data science and machine learning area. So that's why both any version of a notebook where you can sort of load in a lot of data and work with a lot of data, that's where I think either Google Colab or Jupyter notebooks are really useful. So that's kind of what I use mostly.
For myself, I think I use when I was on, because in case this is the first time you met, I'm a programmer. I actually code all day long, struggle all day long. When I'm using Windows environment, I do use Anaconda a lot. That's because I do prefer Anaconda, in fact, because it helps you to control all the environment, or Spider, that is pre-installed in Anaconda. Is very convenient as well. So when I was using Anaconda, I use the terminal and sell the prompt, and with Spider as the editor. When you switch, but like recently, one thing I can suggest, which I think some of you guys are using, is Visual Studio Code. One good thing about Visual Studio Code is it's very convenient. It actually has all the access of all the code, all the different programming language presets. So like when you type a function, it basically shows you all the variable and all the parameters. and it also has a terminal, which like is the command prompt that I just showed it earlier. It actually has the terminal function that is just directly to your terminal, and then to execute your script and like to execute your script. But the tricky thing about using these, you're basically both using Anaconda and the like collab and the Visual Studio Code, such like etc. You have to know your local environment. In case you're a little beginner, you have to know how to actually install everything properly by yourself. But that's something you can definitely Google a lot, and because I've just found it a little bit convenient to just like directly access everything from my laptop, like from my like computer.
All right, so I just have a couple sort of closing slides for today. So as always, today's session was dedicated towards, Q&A, both live and pre-submitted questions, just sort of a review week. But if you have any questions that you think of after today's session, as always, you can join our first our Slack community for the Women Who Code Python track, and then the specific channel that we have dedicated for this study group, which is Beginner Python Study Group, that you should be able to find that in the chat, the link to join our Slack, and then also the name of our Slack channel. And just as a reminder, we have 2 remaining sessions for this study group series. So we have, and they're bi-weekly. So in 2 weeks, we'll have our next session focusing on building your own Python module. And then 2 weeks after that, we'll focus on a mini project in Python. And so that kind of concludes our today's session for today. I hope everyone got all their questions answered. I hope we were able to provide some clarity on anything that you had questions about. And I think that is it for today. Thank you, everyone. And I hope you have a great rest of your morning, day, afternoon, evening, wherever you might be. Thank you.